Welcome back to The Explainer. So, I want you to picture a scenario right now, and honestly, chances are you've literally been here before. You're at a dinner party, or maybe you're sitting in a really high stakes meeting at work, and suddenly you realize you're kind of watching yourself from the outside. You're hitting absolutely every single note perfectly. You're saying exactly the right things, you're providing that super steady, reliable presence that everyone completely expects of you. You look around, you see the smiles, the nods of approval, but underneath that flawless performance, there's just this quiet, cold exhaustion. You feel like a total fraud, just basically waiting for the inevitable collapse. Just think about this phrase for a second. A ghost inhabiting a very convincing costume. I really want you to sit with that. Let the psychological weight of that incredibly uncomfortable truth just sort of settle in. We usually tell ourselves that this is just what it means to be a professional, right? Or what it takes to be a good person. But that explanation is actually dead wrong. Okay, let's really dive into this. That realization hits hard because it exposes a pretty harsh reality. That heavy feeling you carry around like you're a fraud just waiting to be found out, that is not an accident. It's a symptom of a much, much deeper issue. We so often confuse this highly curated, exhausted version of ourselves with maturity. But as our source material reveals, you haven't actually matured. You've just let the real you starve in the dark, while a heavily constructed artificial version of you takes the wheel. And that brings us to part one, the diagnosis. You haven't matured, you've assimilated. We need to strip away the emotion for just a minute and look objectively at the clinical reality behind this widely approved, yet deeply, deeply lonely existence. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that this feeling of quiet emptiness, it's not just some quirky personality trait. It is a diagnosis. Specifically, you are suffering from a total identification with what the pioneering psychologist Carl Jung called the persona. It's a structural issue in how you actually relate to yourself and the entire world around you. Which leads us right into part two, the architecture. How you built the mask. First off, if you are feeling any sense of shame right now, I need you to drop it immediately. Seriously, you didn't build this mask out of vanity or malice. You built it as a highly necessary childhood survival mechanism. You built it because you literally had to. Jung observed that every single human being actually needs a persona. Think of it as a functional interface designed to help you navigate the world safely. Early on in your life, through what our sources call the parental imago, you learned a critical lesson. You learned that certain parts of you were rewarded with warmth and approval, while other parts were either totally ignored or actively punished. So what did you do? You assembled the survival tool entirely from the acceptable parts of yourself. But here's the catch. To keep that safe, smiling, acceptable persona intact, you had to do something with all the other parts of you, right? So you push the unacceptable parts, your anger, your selfishness, your messy, inconvenient desires, deep down into the basement of your psyche. Jung called this dark storage space the shadow. It's basically where everything that would get you punished or ignored was locked away for good. So what this requires is a literal splitting of your psyche right down the middle. You invested absolutely everything you had into the acceptable side, the smiling mask the world wanted to see, and you essentially abandoned the rest of yourself to weather the storm alone. And that brings us to part three, the collapse. Moving inside the mask. Now, having a mask isn't inherently a bad thing. Like we said, we all need one to function in everyday society. The fatal error, the real problem that eventually brings us to the brink of a breakdown, is that at some point, you stopped being the person wearing the mask, and you literally became the mask itself. You started living what Jung referred to as a psychologically outside-in existence. Your identity, your sense of self-worth, your emotional stability, none of these are generated from within you anymore. Instead, they become entirely contingent on external validation. When the world looks at you and approves of the competent professional or the kind one, you feel solid. But because it's outside in, that solidity is a total illusion. And this is exactly why a piece of criticism feels like a complete structural collapse. If someone tells you that your work is sloppy or maybe that you're being selfish, it doesn't just sting your pride. You literally cannot metabolize the critique because it hits the load-bearing wall of your incredibly fragile identity. The very second someone withholds their praise, the floor just disappears from beneath you, and you are briefly, terrifyingly, nobody. The hidden costs of setting up your life this way are just devastating. The thicker the mask grows, the thinner the actual person behind it becomes, until eventually you are a complete stranger to yourself. But I really want you to absorb the hardest truth of this entire explainer. You are surrounded by people who approve of you, yet you feel a profound and nameless loneliness. Why? Because nobody actually knows you. They only know the curated, edited, perfectly managed version that you perform for them every day. So, how do we fix it? That brings us to part 4, the confrontation, reclaiming the center. To escape this outside-in existence, Jung provides a rigorous psychological framework called individuation. Now, it is incredibly empowering work, but I promise you, it is completely unglamorous. The goal of individuation is not to just recklessly smash and destroy your persona. I mean, you still need to exist in the real world. The actual goal is to build enough internal ground, a stable center of gravity, so that putting on the mask becomes a conscious choice rather than an unconscious prison. Here is the protocol to actually reclaim that center. Step 1, you have to withdraw your projections. You know the people who infuriate you the absolute most in your daily life? Well, they are very often holding the suppressed parts of your own shadow. If someone's selfishness drives you absolutely crazy, you need to ask yourself what part of your own self-interest you've suppressed just to maintain your selfless mask. Step 2 is sitting with the pure, awkward discomfort of just not performing for the room. And step 3 is refusing to contort yourself, actively reclaiming that center you outsourced to everyone else's opinions for so long. When you actually do this rigorous work, you fundamentally change. You become someone who can be rejected without being totally destroyed. You are no longer emotionally controlled by others because you finally stopped outsourcing your center to them. And the really beautiful paradox here is that once you reclaim your center, the approval of others finally becomes genuinely pleasant to experience, precisely because you no longer structurally need it to survive. I want to close out this explainer by leaving you with a pretty stark, confrontational question. Just think about this. Are you authoring a life, or are you just managing an image? Are you living from the inside out, or are you just wearing a really convincing costume, waiting for the applause? The choice of what you do next is entirely yours.